So I'm in the grove of trees where I was first kind of drawn or welcomed to where I'm living right now. And the first time that I walked in here, I actually didn't realize what was in front of my own eyes at the time. I was told by this tree right here, after I found a hornet who was hanging out right in there, to come back. And if I could identify what kind of tree it was, then I would be allowed to come back and do ceremony here. So at the time there were leaves on the tree, and I did some sleuthing. It took me about a week to figure out that it's an ash tree. And excuse me. And so coming back, I then saw right before my very eyes where I was, these markings, which for me always represent symbols of the mother, the great mother. She has two on her. And then I discovered that this tree also has a beautiful representation of the mother, quite profound, and they're neighbors to one another. So this is where I come and do ceremony. One of those times that I came back to do ceremony, I actually found this lovely old shovel on the ground, which is now covered in leaves, and I'll have to take the leaves off because I'm going to burn a bit of incense on top of the shovel. I just want to show you the setup. I've got all of my supplies for our project here. Sticks, scissors, string, and then various offerings. I also have a bone that I'm going to use as part of this project. You don't need a bone. Bones are not necessary, it's just me. So this is where I'm going to be gathering some materials from. I'm actually right on the edge of where you just saw me, which is in this grove back here. This is a lovely meadow. You can't actually see the largeness of the meadow. Beyond these trees and just over a little hill is quite a large open meadow where there's a lot of beautiful plants, medicines, things that are happy and wild growing. And I'm going to be very sad when the housing development starts to be built there and I may lose access to this particular spot. However, here we are, and so far the meadow is still there. I'm going to be gathering grasses as part of my project. You can gather whatever materials are around you that are easy to access and that you're not impacting in a heavy way any of the plant stands. Always make sure to ask plants when you want to gather or pick them. Make sure that you feel a yes coming from them or have some sort of confirmation. And leave offerings behind as well in gratitude. So I'm going to take a few minutes to do that. We will reconvene back at our project spot. So I've finished gathering materials, and I'm going to try and be in a place where you can actually see what I'm doing. I have sticks, string, scissors, and I also have a bone. You don't need any other things other than sticks and string, scissors, and then whatever you gather. I like using a bone some years just because it's me. I like bones. I have offerings. I have a few things that I've gathered. I'm going to pull them into the screen in a second. So what we're doing at this time of year is making something called the Winter Mother. Mara is the Ukrainian word for it. You might also hear the word Morena, which I believe is the Russian word for it. And Mara is the protectress of us through the winter. She embodies the energy of winter, but she also embodies you. And so when you make a Mara, you are asking for protection for yourself, for your family, for the lands where you reside, where she's going to be resting. I've got a beautiful little chickadee who's come to say hello. And She will stay in wherever you place her, your front yard, backyard, or for me, I'm going to be actually here at what I call the Sacred Grove. I'm going to leave her here for protection of this particular space because I come here often to do ceremony. So when we make the mara, we're in ceremony. Remember that. That means, act with accordance, be in integrity with yourself, be in integrity with the space and with the materials that you're using. I made offerings when I went to the meadow to pick the grasses. I also picked some dead or dying pearly everlasting, just a little bit of it. And I picked a few grasses that are dying, a fern leaf that was dying, and some birch bark that I found on the ground, not off a tree, and a piece of lichen that had fallen from one of the trees. So all of those I'm going to use to create mara. Obviously, we're using natural materials. These are things just you're going to go out and forage. And working with the mara, the making of it, the reason I'm doing the film right now is because when I did ceremony yesterday, which was the dark new moon cusp, as I just completed the ceremony and I was in a place where there's a ridge just like about a 10-minute walk from here. As I completed that ceremony, I just heard whispers to start picking up my sticks. We got to make the mara, and that's fine. It's great. There's no snow on the ground, so it's actually easier for me to forage the materials. We're expecting snow again next week. We had some last week, but it melted. So I'm choosing to make her early and put the video up early so that you have the opportunity to do it anytime between now and the solstice. Actually, technically, you can make your mara and continue to make or build your mara between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. But by winter solstice, she's complete. And as she is, however, whatever form she's in at that point, that's when she resides over the lands, because that's the beginning, technical beginning of winter. And she will stay there through till the spring. And then we do a release ceremony for her in the spring. There's a couple of ways that she gets released depending on what is happening in the land around you. If the snows have melted by that point, then she gets released to running water and she just goes down the stream or river. If there's still snow on the ground, you can burn her. Of course, you have to make sure you're not in a place where you're going to light up the woods. But she would get burned in a campfire or a sacred prayer fire, and then her ashes are released to the land. So let's get started. I'm working with usually 2 sticks, but right now you'll see that I have a few sticks. I think for ease, to make sure that she stands up, I'm going to actually lean my stick that has kind of a bend to it into the other stick so that she can actually be upright. And then I have a slightly shorter stick. That's going to be her arms that we're going to attach. So we're going to start with the main body. I like my maras to have horns. You don't need to. No, not horns, but like antlers. Again, you can just have like a plain stick for her body and another plain stick for her arms. She is made in the shape of the solar cross. Solar cross is like a plus sign, so an equal lengthed body and arms. Although I tend to adjust where the arms are going to be because I don't know how far my stick is going to stick into the ground or be pushed into the ground. And right now the ground is really frozen. It's about 0 degrees right now, so I may not get it very far, which is why I want to have a stick that I can lean it into. So start by just adjusting where you want your arms to be. I think that's the approximate place I want to place them. And you're going to find your string. It's a very simple project. Not nearly as elaborate as some of the other things that we've made so far. And you will need to have a tail on your string. I don't know if you can see it because this is really thin. But basically a long enough tail that when I'm ready I can tie off my mara. And my string I'm going to place on the ground rather than trying to hold on to it, and just let myself use the string as needed. So the first wrap to make two sticks stick together, the first wrap is actually diagonal and going over what one would consider her shoulder, across her chest and under the armpit of the other side. And I'm going to do that a few times. Now, because I've chosen sticks that are really unusually shaped, it's going to take me a few minutes to do this. And actually, I might change my hand position to make it a little easier. See if this is any easier. Not much, but a little. So I'm doing that same diagonal wind several times. My chickadee friend is really curious, and it's flittering from one tree to another, watching us and chirping away. Actually, there's a few of them. A few times ago, I had deer, a mama and her two. They looked like they were about 6 months old, maybe a little older, and they came very close to me here. They were curious, the mom more curious than the little ones. And then they slowly walked off. They didn't get scared at all. Probably because we're in a residential area. So now what I'm going to do, I've gone over from one shoulder to the armpit on the other side a few times. I'm now going to go around the waist, just underneath, basically sort of right where the armpits are. And why do I call that the waist? Well, I think I mentioned this in a previous video. So in the old Slavic culture, one would wear their sashes just under the breast line, and the skirts would go that high. The shirt would be tucked in, unless the shirt is really long, and then you have aprons that are tied here with the sash. And the reason being that if you tie here, you're actually cutting the flow of the energy. That's partly digestive energy, but it's also the energy of birthing energy or menstrual energy. We don't want to cut it off. We want to keep the life force full and flowing. So the waist was considered here, and this was considered an energy center that needed to be protected as well. So the sash was across here. Sometimes amulets would be worn right over that particular spot, which is why I wear my goddess amulet there. So here we are, we're going around the waist a few times. Now I've gone around the waist a couple of times. And now I'm going to do the opposite diagonal. So the opposite diagonal under the armpit, over the shoulder, making an X shape. I said it's simple, but it's actually, when you're working with sticks, it's not all that easy. I could have brought a much thicker string. This would happen a lot faster if I used a thicker string. I just pulled out what I had on top, so it's a thin string. There we are. Next time, thicker string. All right, so now I've done several winds across the opposite shoulder. My X is not very prominent at this moment, but it's still there as a pattern. But the arms, when you've only done a couple of winds like that, they're not very stable. So a trick. Here's the stick, here's the arms. I'm going to go actually in between the stick and the arms and wind the string several times. And what that does is it creates more stability. Now I will continue to wind around and repeat the original pattern a few times. So the first X, first part of the X, first diagonal of the X. Obviously, if you have bigger sticks, it will be a little bit more clumsy than I already am being. And that's okay. Take your time, you know, have fun with it. This is not meant to be somehow an expression of sheer perfection. This is rough crafting, and it's fun. Around the waist a few times. You'll see that I use my thumb to draw the strings upward to the waist. And now, I did that one already. I'll do the other. Which way did I go? I already did that one. So, sorry, I'm just taking my time to figure out which way I'm going now. This way. Now the other part of the X. So, one of the things that you can think about for winter is that if you were reliant on the land and producing all of your food for yourself and your family on the land that you live, meaning you're not going to a grocery store, just simply growing food, tending to animals who will feed you for the whole year, then you will remember that come winter, your pantries are full when harvest is complete and all the processing has been done. There's my arms, and they're actually pretty stable now, and they're not going to move very much. So your pantry would be complete when all the harvesting is done. And come solstice, you're going to have a big celebration usually, kind of to mark the transition from one year to the next year. But from that point through the whole winter, the storage in the pantry begins to deplete more and more and more. And usually around the second to third, definitely the third moon, but usually even around the second moon past the solstice, your pantries are getting really thin, quite depleted. And that would be called starvation moon, the moon of starvation, when people are, you're making cabbage soup and having that every single day, or whatever it is that has been able to stay long enough in your pantry that's green. And there ain't a whole lot of else that's getting added. So, what does Mara do? What we're doing is we're creating an effigy that that is representing the winter energy. It's also representing you, and you want to honor that that particular energy and ask for kindness, so that you're not going to end up having too much illness over the winter, too much difficulty over the winter, that there will be enough food to keep you going through the winter, crossing fingers, hoping. And while that may not feel relevant to some people these days, it's still relevant to many people across the world. So it's important to remember that even if you're in a context where you have a great deal of privilege, your privilege is reliant on other people. It's reliant on those who are doing the growing of the food. It's reliant on those who are giving you, for example, employment where you can then have the money to pay for your food. We have to remember that our relationship is direct, though, with the earth. Where does your food come from? It's not coming out of thin air. Well, maybe it's involving the air, but literally it's coming from the earth. It's coming from the whole earth system. And so we pay our respects to the energies of winter so that we can both honor and remember the importance of being in balance through the whole year, and that it still is important for us to be mindful of how we use resources from the earth and how we use other people in order to benefit from those resources. And don't get me going on that, because there's a lot to say about that using of other people. So Here we are. I'm cutting my string. I could break my string. Maybe I'll try breaking it next time. And now I need to tie 3 knots. You remember that for each of the things that we make, we tie 3 knots. Blessed be, please bind my prayers and intentions to Mara. I'm going to leave these strings long because they will be useful for the next steps. So I've decided she's going to have antlers. So I'm going to leave this as being the top of the head, and now I'm going to make the face and head itself. And she's faceless, just like all of the Mutanki are. I'm going to put a bone that represents the head. I'm not making facial features. It's just the bone that represents the head. You don't need to have a bone. You could have other things that you're putting in place. Actually, I will be putting that there in a second. I just remembered that there's something else I want to place as well. I'm going to grab my other materials. Maybe some of them. So part of what I wanted to use for the head is to use something that was green. It's not going to stay green, but at least for now, something that's green. And I have some birch bark and a little piece of lichen. So I'm going to just wrap everything together. These to me represent the lovely plant beings who are here on these lands. Again, this is not fancy and you don't have to make yours this way. One thing about doing this particular project is that you have a lot of freedom. I remember somebody one year used a beet for her mara, for the head. Some people don't use any particular anything for the head or face. They just use the sticks as they are, have 2 sticks together, and their mara is complete with 2 sticks. What am I doing right now? I'm binding round and round just to keep the materials together, so you can see. And again, I'm going to tie those off. I'm going to leave long strings for the time being because they will help me attach this part to the head. And again, 3 knots. Blessed be. Blessed be. Oops, string broke. When a string breaks. Well, when a string breaks, we need to look at whether we were distracted. And if we were distracted, what were we distracted by? Where was our mind if it wasn't here on this? So where was my mind? My mind was on thinking about the sun and moon and the fact that I forgot to tell you that as you wind your string, please remember to visualize, think about the sun and the moon. How we observe them here on Earth is that it almost looks like they're going around the Earth. We know that that's not what's happening, but that's how they are appearing to us. So we visualize the sun and the moon moving as we wind. And what that does is it helps to bring the energies of nature into our work, and it reminds us of the importance of the cycles of nature. That's where my mind was when I broke the string. So I'm back here now with you. And I've left my tail ends, and I will pick this up again in a few moments. I'm going to place it here for now. So how am I going to attach this lovely bone to my mara? And do I want my arms to be in the front or the back? I'm going to keep my arms in the back, actually. I think I prefer that. Yep. Again, no right and wrong way to, if you're going to put on any kind of object or thing as part of your mara. That's me deciding whether I actually want to use the bone or not. Because the bone has this little protrusion at the back, I need the protrusion higher than that nub on my piece of wood. And I'm going to wind the bone onto the antlers. So in Russian regions, and I'm not sure if there were some in Ukraine, women's headdresses had many different shapes and forms. One of the shapes and forms that you would see on a woman's headdress had these two horns, and I don't remember, it starts with a K. I don't remember the name of the horns or the headdress. But what it represented were these antlers. And the idea is that with the antlers, we have sort of a divining rod to the cosmic forces. That we're actually drawing in cosmic forces, the ethereal knowledge. It's like remembering the tree of life, and it's being the branches that reach out as the tree of life. So their headdresses were mimicking that. And that's why I like using the antlers here. And it's just symbolic representations of. See that I'm temporarily winding this particular tail over her arm so it's out of my way while I do my work. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a bell ringing in the background signaling it's noontime. So even though I'm in a little forest grove here, I am in an urban area. And you can hear neighbors' dogs barking and bells and maybe some traffic in the background. All of the times I've been here, though, I haven't encountered anybody in this particular spot. Not even nearby. I don't think anybody really walks into the forest often. So my bone is more or less attached. I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, which is to secure it in place. Come now. It's pretty good. Maybe a little bit more winding. I think what I'm going to do is put on the next part before I secure it in place. So I want this to go across the face like that. Well, maybe I'll go above. What do I like? No, I want it across the face like that. So like I said, have fun with it. Don't look for perfection. It's not about being perfect. It's about having something that feels like a beautiful expression of your, what you imagine a winter mother to be. Now I have a lot of strings hanging down. I'm trying to sort out which one is which. There we go. I will tie them all in place shortly. So if I decide to burn her, I will probably go to my brother's place where they are on the river about 15 minutes from here, and they have a lovely fire pit in a big outdoor space, so I could have a big fire. But that's still quite some time away from now because we're not even close to winter yet. So if you're wondering exactly what time this was made, it's one moon. Just had new moon yesterday. One moon from winter solstice. Okay. So I've attached the head. Currently it looks like this. And I'm going to take all of my long strings and wind them a few more times. Just to secure and use up the string. This would be recipe. Recipe. There you go. That's her head. Now I'm going to make skirts for her. And I'm going to do that with the grasses. So I picked a bunch of the dead grasses. There's also some of the Purley Everlasting. I'm going to leave the Purley Everlasting at the front. All I'm doing is I'm distributing the grasses around the front and back of her. So it looks like she's got a skirt. And then, yes, you guessed it, you get to wind yet again. Some people like to give her a shirt, and so they also put grasses or boughs of something, maybe cedar or fir or whatever you have in your area, on her arms as well. I'm going to leave her arms bare. I typically do leave her arms bare. Some years I put things on, but most of the time I leave them as they are. So with the skirt, the trick is that you want to make sure that the string is tight enough around the skirt. And again, I need to make sure that I leave a tail long enough that I can tie it later. So let's do this one thing at a time. The tail is going to be long enough that I'm going to put it around her arm. Now I'm going to begin to wind my string. And as I wind, again, we're imagining the sun and the moon traveling around and around. I don't know, I'm going to have to figure out a way to do this that I'm not getting all tangled like I currently am. Maybe what I'm going to do. Excuse me for a second. So it's nice to see that even I struggle with this after many years of doing this project. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my ball and I will keep the ball in my hand. And that will make it a little bit easier. I'm not just going to wind this around in one spot. I'm actually going to travel up and down a few times because it's really hard to get the grass to adhere to the stick and not fall down. And then of course it breaks. So now that it's broken, I'm going to take off this part. I keep all of my little string ends, and the reason that I keep them is that they become stuffing in a future motunka. Blessed be. May any of my frustrations and distractions not become part of this mara, but rather remain mine alone to deal with. So I don't remember where I left off when it broke. But here we are. Adherence, getting the grass to adhere to mara. I'm actually going to use her arms a little bit as helpers. And the other side. I'm going to go across her chest again to make the X. So why am I making an X across her chest? If you've watched other videos, you will remember that there are two crosses. There's a solar cross, which looks like the plus sign, and there is an earth cross, which looks like an X. Together, when you overlay them, they form 8 directions. which are related to teachings that come from the Tree of Life. But it also, they can each stand on their own in terms of teachings. So you can think of the solar cross as north, south, east, west. And then the earth cross is the non-cardinal directions. Northwest, southwest, northeast, southeast. But it doesn't literally have to be about directions. It's more about the teachings that come with those. Movements of time, movements of season. Think about the X as being very stable. There are vessels to the X. I'll show you in a second. So I'm going to break this and tie it off. Yes, my nose is drippy. Less. Less. And less. And there is my winter mother. I love her. She's so pretty. She's so pretty. So, sometimes I tie her to a tree. Sometimes I put her in the ground. I don't know where I'm going to eventually put her, but I'm going to turn off the camera while I find a spot for her. And then once I do, we'll come back for the offerings. So I decided that rather than trying to force her into the ground, which is not very easy here in the winter frozen earth, I have attached her to one of the branches that come off of the mother tree, Forest Ma, and I am burning some of the herbs as offering. I've also made offerings in the tree itself, in the hole. I placed some offerings inside of her head, and of course this. These are a lot of the herbs that I burn regularly when they're in their whole form, and I alchemize them together into an incense dough. And so here we are. Gratitude for you all joining me on the project. Yes, that's a feather that I found on one of the times that I was here that I also put in the bark of the tree. May you have a beautiful ceremony making your mara, and may she protect you well through the winter months. Blessed be.